Welcome back to Pick It. We took a parlay yesterday which had odds of 4.44, and we hit it out of the park, making it a phenomenal day regardless of the outcome for our player picks. Although we had 3 wins and 4 losses from our video yesterday, there were some mediocre performances worth mentioning. Gary Harris attempted 7 3-point shots but only managed to make 1. Jaden Ivey's game time was limited, which worked in our favor for points bet but not for turnovers bet, as he ended with 2 turnovers when we needed 3. Gordon had the opportunity to score over 13.5 points but failed to capitalize on it. While Murray had a shocking night for us, his rebounding performance was lacking, managing only 2 rebounds throughout the game. Now let's delve into today's thrilling action. Our first game features an exciting matchup between the Cavaliers and Pacers. This will be their 3rd encounter this season. In their last meeting on November 3rd, the Pacers emerged victorious with a score of 121-116, led by Miles Turner's 27 points. Donovan Mitchell scored an impressive 38 points for the Cavaliers. Both teams have an average of 236 points per game, which indicates a high-scoring game. Based on the stats, we believe the game total will go over the line. In terms of the spread, the Cavaliers covered in their last game against the Pacers, and their cover rates for the season and head-to-head matchups are superior to the Pacers. This makes us lean towards the Cavaliers, but we would consider strengthening the line to enhance our chances of success. The Cavaliers have been averaging 113.6 points per game, and all our categories favor them hitting over their team total. We would explore alternate lines to maximize our potential return. On the other hand, the Pacers have been averaging 123 points per game, placing them in first position. Although the stats don't strongly support hitting over their team total, they have hit over in nearly 70% of their games this season. We would also consider exploring different lines for this bet. Moving on to the Pistons and Celtics game, this will be their 2nd meeting this season. The Celtics secured a 128-122 victory in overtime during their last matchup on December 29th, with Kristaps Porzingis scoring 35 points. Looking at the game total, the stats suggest that it's more likely to stay under. However, considering their last game, we would prefer to explore alternate lines for both outcomes. When it comes to the spread, the Pistons have a strong advantage based on the stats, with an impressive cover rate of nearly 80% in each of our categories. They also comfortably covered in their last game against the Celtics. The Pistons have been averaging 112 points per game, and the stats indicate a higher likelihood of hitting over their team total. This holds true for both the season and head-to-head matchups, as well as recent form. We would consider strengthening the line for this bet. As for the Celtics, they rank 2nd in points per game, averaging 121 points. While they are expected to score plenty, the line may be a bit high. Exploring lower or higher lines would be beneficial to increase the chances of success. Our first pick is Isaiah Stewart to have under 0.5 steals, hitting in 4 of his last 4 games, and 4 of his last 5 games against Boston, while Boston is 2nd for steals against. His cover rate also looks solid for this one. We also like him to have over 16.5 points and rebounds. He has managed this in 15 of his last 20 games, 4 in his last 5 away games, and 100% in all 7 games against Boston. Next, we have the highly anticipated match between the Heat and the 76 ERs. These 2 teams will face off for the 3rd time this season. In their last meeting on February 15th, the Heat emerged victorious with a score of 109-104, led by Tyler Herro's 23 points. Maxey scored 30 points for the 76 ERs. The average combined points per game for these teams is 225, and the cover rate for going over our line is favorable. Although they only cover in 30% of their recent games, we believe that exploring alternate markets could strengthen this bet. When it comes to the spread, we are not particularly keen on a specific outcome. However, if we were to choose, we would lean towards an alternate line in favor of the Heat covering. They managed to cover in their last matchup against the 76 ERs, as they have done in the majority of their head-to-head matchups and this season's games. The Heat have been averaging 110 points per game, and while we slightly favor them going over their team total, it's not a strong preference. They have a solid hit rate of 76% for the season and above 50% for matchups in recent form. Exploring alternate lines would be wise to maximize the potential outcome. On the other hand, the 76 ERs average 115 points per game, While they have a strong tendency to hit over in their season games, they prefer to stay under in recent games, especially against Miami. Taking this into consideration, we would also consider exploring alternate lines for this bet. Moving on to the matchup between the Blazers and Bulls, these teams will meet for the second time this season. The Bulls secured a 104-96 victory in their last matchup on January 29th. The stats show a preference for going over the game total, despite struggling to do so in their last game. They have an 80% hit rate in their head-to-head matchups and recent form, as well as a 73% cover rate for this season's games. Strengthening this bet or adding it to a parlay could be advantageous. Looking at the spread, we would naturally lean towards the Bulls covering, as they have a strong cover rate of 80% against the Blazers. However, when considering recent and season form, the percentage drops significantly. This bet should only be considered if we can strengthen the line. The Blazers average 107 points per game, and while it's not our favorite, the stats slightly lean towards going over their team total. They have a hit rate of over 60% across the board. Exploring alternate lines would be beneficial for this bet. As for the Bulls team total, they average 112 points per game, which is a similar situation to the Blazers. Exploring alternate lines, especially favoring the over, would be a wise choice. Our player pick is Anfernee Simons to have over 3.5 made threes, hitting it in 7 of his last 8 games and 8 of his last 9 away games. It also helps knowing Chicago is 29th in 3 points against. We also went for Ayo Dosunmu to have under 17.5 points. He has managed this in 5 of his last 7 games while holding a solid 100% in all 5 games against the Blazers. Now let's dive into the thrilling matchup between the Timberwolves and Jazz. These teams will meet for the 4th time this season. The Timberwolves secured a 119-100 victory in their last matchup on March 17th. Looking at the game total, they have an average of 230 points per game, and the cover rates indicate a strong likelihood of going over. When it comes to the spread, the stats are almost even, with the Timberwolves covering by a significant margin in their last game. We would lean towards them covering, but exploring alternate lines could alter our perspective. The Timberwolves average 113 points per game, and while it's a hit line, we would lean towards them hitting over. The hit rates for the season and recent form are almost even, and they have a strong preference for hitting over in games against the Jazz. On the other hand, the Jazz average 117 points per game, placing them in 9th position. We would also lean towards them hitting over, as their cover rates are better in all categories. Strengthening these bets with alternate lines is highly recommended. Our player pick is Lauri Markkanen to have under 22.5 points. He has managed this in 7 of his last 9 games, 4 in his 5 games against the Wolves, and it also helps that the Timberwolves are ranked first in points against. And now, let's dive into the exciting matchup between the Grizzlies and the Kings. These two teams are meeting for the 3rd time this season, and the Kings came out on top in their last showdown with a score of 103-94 on January 30th. When you look at the combined average points per game for both teams, it sits at a solid 223. The numbers suggest that the game will go over the total, but recent form might put a damper on that prediction as it leans towards staying under. Now let's analyze the spread. In their previous game against the Kings, the Grizzlies barely managed to cover the line. However, when you look at their overall cover rate, they dominate the Kings in every category. Therefore, exploring alternate lines could be a viable option to strengthen the Grizzlies' chances of covering their line. Moving on to the Grizzlies' team total, they typically score an average of 105 points per game. It's a tough call, but I lean slightly towards them hitting over this line. Of course, finding a better line would be ideal, but the alternative market might make the under option more appealing. On the other side, the Kings have an average of 118 points per game for their team total. This is a steep line to reach. Considering their preference for staying under in games against the Grizzlies with an impressive 78% hit rate, I would consider adjusting this line to strengthen the under. Our player pick is Harrison Barnes to have over 17.5 points, rebounds, and assists. He has hit this in 4 of his last 5 games, 4 in his last 5 at home, and a solid 7 in his last 8 matchups against the Grizzlies. Now let's shift our attention to the Knicks and Warriors matchup. These teams are meeting for the 2nd time this season, with the Warriors emerging victorious in their last encounter with a score of 110-99 on March 1st. The game total seems likely to stay under, as it did in their previous matchup. In fact, both matchups and recent form indicate that the under has hit in 60% of the games. However, it's worth noting that the Warriors have gone over 74% of the time this season, averaging a combined 230 points per game. When it comes to the spread, the statistics favor the Knicks to cover. However, they failed to do so in their last game against the Warriors. To increase the matchup hit rate, exploring alternate markets might present appealing betting opportunities on either side. Looking at the Knicks team total, they average 112 points per game. This is another situation where considering alternate markets is advisable. Based on the stats, I lean towards them, hitting over this line. However, diving into the alternate markets could potentially change that perspective. Ultimately, the option that can be strengthened the most should be chosen. As for the Warriors' game total, they manage an impressive average of 128 points per game. I really like the look of this hitting over, especially considering their 80% success rate in both the season and recent form. They consistently perform above this line, making it a strong candidate for a single bet or even a parlay. Our player pick is Andrew Wiggins to have over 1.5 assists. His matchups are looking solid, while he has also hit it in 8 of his last 11 games and a huge 10 in his last 11 home games. Last but not least, let's analyze the matchup between the Hawks and the Lakers. These two teams are squaring off for the second time this season, with the Hawks securing a 138-122 victory in their previous meeting on January 31st. Trae Young led the way for the Hawks with 26 points, while Austin Reeves scored 28 points for the Lakers. The game total suggests that it's likely to go over, as it has in all of their previous encounters and in 60% of their season's games. However, recent form indicates a drop-off, possibly due to injuries. The combined average points per game for both teams stands at an impressive 237. Regarding the spread, I prefer the Hawks to cover. Despite the absence of one of their key players, altering the line could result in a strong bet in my opinion. The Hawks have shown resilience and have the potential to cover the spread. Now let's focus on the Hawks team total. They average 119 points per game, and it's clear that they have a better chance of hitting over this line. Although recent form may weaken this prediction, it's an area that can be easily strengthened to support the over option. This is the direction I lean towards. Turning our attention to the Lakers team total, they average 117 points per game. I also prefer them hitting over this line. While it aligns closely with their average, their recent form and previous games against the Hawks indicate a dominant tendency to hit over. Our final pick is Clint Capella to have over 1.5 assists. He has managed this in 6 of his last 8 games, 5 of his last 6 away games. His stats are far from the best, yet it helps knowing the Lakers are ranked 28th in assists against. Please note that these picks are based on statistical analysis and historical data. It's important to do your own research and consider other factors before making any betting decisions. Good luck, and may the odds be in your favor.